Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Kidney Coach YouTube channel. I am naturopath Fiona Chin, co-founder of the Kidney Disease Solution, Kidney Coach, and our supplement range, Cardiovascular. And I'm joined again today by the wonderful Jessianna Saville. She is the leading renal dietitian at Kidney Nutritional Institute. She has been in the kidney industry for a long time. She's a leader in the field. She's training other renal dietitians and speaking at lots of programs and seminars. But she's also just a wealth of knowledge and an amazing person. Jessianna, thank you for joining me again and welcome back.
It's awesome to be here. Excited to talk about some cool kidney stuff and really dig into some good information.
I feel like you and I have joined the blonde clubs because we've both gone lighter.
No.
So I'm coming into summer, you're coming out of summer. So we synced up on our hairstyles. But what we wanted to dig in today, a bit more importantly, is just the role of phosphorus, which is Jess and I have had so many conversations. We often get together before a podcast and just like go down the rabbit hole of what do you think's driving this and that. And we've been having this dive and digging into the role of both nitrogen and phosphorus and how it plays into kidney disease. But we're going to go down the rabbit hole of phosphorus today because that's one we definitely see. It's one we know. And I think it's a mechanism that goes out very early in kidney disease, well before we sometimes even see other markers. But let's dive straight into it. Just what have you been finding? So I know you sent me some amazing research right before we jumped on here. So I know you've gone further down the rabbit hole than where I've gone with it all. Where are you at with phosphorus? And first off, what is phosphorus? And then let's dig into
Great.
it.
It's a good question, and it's a really important clarification point for CKD and dialysis and what is thought of and thought about. So when somebody gets diagnosed with kidney disease, and if you're watching this, that's probably where you're at. A lot of times people go on and they Google, what can I eat with kidney disease? And they see all this information about cut potassium out of your diet, cut phosphorus out of your diet. We've done multiple podcasts on potassium, so go check those out. But with
Yeah.
phosphorus, it's really interesting on where it historically fits in the kidney world, but also what is missed. So historically in the kidney world, people that are on dialysis were recommended to follow a low phosphorus diet because when you don't have kidney function, you get this really weird metabolism of this mineral. It's a mineral in your body. It's a very important mineral that's used for tons of functions. One of the big highlighted ones, which is not the only one, but it's the one that gets all the attention, is your bone mineral metabolism. So how phosphorus drives this mineralization of your bone and how it balances with calcium. So for dialysis patients, people with very minimal kidney function or even late stage kidney disease, this marker in the blood was always seen as going up. And the intervention that is commonly used, this is a core intervention. Your dialysis unit, if you're on dialysis, people on dialysis, their dialysis unit is graded on the overall phosphorus levels of patients because it's highly linked to cardiovascular events like heart attack or stroke.
Yes.
So it gets a ton of attention if you have kidney disease, but it's primarily given attention from this lens of bone mineral disease and cardiovascular disease, and that's it, right? It really just kind of gets in this really narrow area that we think about phosphorus. But for chronic kidney disease, there's a lot of relevance when it comes to progression, but it's super hard to see in the labs, and that's why it doesn't get a lot of attention.
Yeah, and it's funny because again, before we hit record, we're like, we've got a theory, maybe some people are more nitrogen sensitive, some people are more phosphorus sensitive, and that's where it comes to diet and keto analogs and protein, but that's for another podcast. But we were like, how can we see it in the labs? And it is one of those things, the way that phosphorus is moving inside all these different pathways, that it might not be phosphorus specifically that we see it in, I know we will see it in something called FGF23, vitamin D, clotho, and calcium, but it's still really hard to then translate that back and know. And like FGF23 and clotho, we don't measure it. I don't think any labs have really yet got an accurate way of doing that. That would probably give inflammation. We generally take a guess that we know when the parathyroid and vitamin D is moving, that pathway is probably out. That's how I know that pathway is out, when we see changes in the parathyroid or very low vitamin D, which is a very normal thing for me to see. I'm pretty sure vitamin D works very closely with phosphorus, the clotho, and the FGF23 pathway. But you've gone down the rabbit hole if there's even more pathways, and because phosphorus being such a key mineral in the way the body works. So are there any other clues that you found out in all of that you were sort of digging into, of other markers we could be looking at that might flag us that maybe phosphorus is an issue?
So I don't necessarily have a good marker, but I
Mm,
think there's two ways we can think about how you could back up and make some pretty strong conclusions, at least from a dietary standpoint and from knowing like where people are at with their food. There a couple things though is that if I just back it up a little bit, like where is this like what are the other pathways that we're talking about, right? Like your bones, your cardiovascular disease. When I went down and I looked specifically, it's just like, I just want to know if there are studies that show that phosphorus intake is impacting kidney tissue, not
mm,
heart disease, not bones. So I didn't want to look at if the kidneys get dysregulated, is there a dysfunction in the phosphorus metabolism and how's it hurt our body. I just wanted to know if phosphorus hurts kidney tissue in general, because then that's going to put a lot of weight for me as a preventative clinician on how I'm going to intervene with this. So here is my list of areas, and there's studies behind all of these, right?
I'll put
So
these in the
here's
notes
one.
because Tess has done a great job of putting it
Yeah,
together.
okay. So I'm going to read from my list. That's how it works. So there was a study in 2010 in Nature Reviews, and it showed that high phosphate levels directly damage the tubular epithelial cells. And this leads to tubular. So you're thinking like the kind of the delicate part of the kidneys, but it leads to tubular atrophy. So the tubes are going to shrink, and
Yeah,
interstitial fibrosis. So this scarring, right?
right, which is the
And they
big
said that was,
driver of chronic infection.
yeah,
Yeah,
high phosphorus in particular. Okay, so that was one. Two,
yeah.
vascular calcification, which we've already talked about, but specifically in the kidney cells, what they saw is that when you have this vascular, so vascular is your heart, your cardiovascular system, right? So your blood veins, etc. Um, this vascular smooth muscle cells, what they saw is that when phosphorus levels were high or people ate excessive phosphorus, it caused not only arterial calcification, which we know, right? The blood vessels, which should be able to expand and contract and be soft, they get hard, but it caused reduced kidney perfusion. So
Oh,
because you had vascular calcification, you were also seeing that the kidneys were not able to, function, and the blood flow didn't go through as well. Number three is they saw hyperphosphatemia, increased oxidative stress in kidney cells specifically, right? And that causes mitochondrial dysfunction and cell death.
right.
Um, Another one, high phosphate levels stimulate production of inflammatory cytokines that causes chronic kidney disease inflammation. Um, this one, way better than me, Fiona. This is a really interesting, hugely like expansive hot topic in the kidney world, and that is something called fibroblast growth factor, FGF
Mm,
23. So when you have too much phosphorus, it's phosphorus overload, which we'll talk about. Is that just from too much eating or what? But if you have phosphorus overload, you have increase in FGF 23, and that has a direct toxic effect on the heart, which they say indirectly impacts kidney function. So that, like, it's not directly kidney tissue, but if you impact your heart, I think it's not going to go well. Um, so clotho suppression, another favorite topic of yours.
yeah.
High phosphate levels cause this decrease in clotho expression. So, and that causes this accelerated aging like organ
Hmm.
damage. So your
Hmm.
kidneys could be like 80 years old and you're only 50.
Yeah.
So a
Yeah.
huge piece as well, directly from phosphorus, right? Two more, nephron loss acceleration. So
Oh, wow.
high phosphorus levels. Yeah, it said in this study from 2011, the hyperphosphatemia. So this is when you actually can see it in your blood, that it accelerates the loss of your functional nephrons. That's like
Wow.
your kidney function. Um, and that's going to create this vicious cycle of you have declining kidney function, and then you have higher phosphorus and declining, and you just kind of get in this bad cycle. Last one is endothelial dysfunction. So they saw that high phosphorus levels impaired the endothelial function, and that contributed to a microvascular disease in the kidney.
That makes sense. Now, here's my question, because when I think of phosphorus, I think of farming practices and fertilizers. And, we've obviously got Roundup and things like that. What do you think as a potential that we're seeing an explosion of these kind of accelerated diseases that you've just covered with all the things that phosphorus can do? And I don't know. So I am literally it popped into my head as you were
Hmm.
talking.
I don't know, right? It would be an interesting thing to look at. There's definitely studies on how herbicides and pesticides cause kidney damage, but whenever I've looked at those, they're not necessarily targeting phosphorus pathways. But it would make sense for a patient maybe that has a heavy phosphorus load, then you put on more with a chemical form of phosphate that it could really add to those phosphate loads. Yeah, for sure. And what I don't know is, well, I guess we talked about it in a second. I just haven't thought about it intensely, but I think there would be some patients just based on their nutrient status that probably would be metabolizing phosphorus from different people. Because some people are going to get phosphorus into the right place, such as their bones,
Mm.
which would which then is not so much of a risk factor of it circulating through the blood and causing, nephron loss acceleration, endothelial dysfunction, direct tubular toxicity, etc. So I think it's going to change a little bit, but it's definitely, I think it'd be a really interesting piece to pick out and think through for different people.
Yeah, I am. Yeah, I'm now really fascinated about this glycophosphate role because of just, we're overusing them. So I will dig down that rabbit hole
I
between
know you
now
will.
and speak to you next, because I'm suddenly thinking that makes sense of why we're seeing such a rise in chronic disease like cardiovascular disease and things like kidney disease, and maybe the role of glycophosphates, because
Yeah, so
yeah, I was on the
huge.
yeah, and they've been overused and oversprayed, and we definitely know they change the microbiome of the soil and all of those kind of things, and they do affect our microbiome. So, potentially because they're GMO'd and different types of phosphates, that the body just doesn't know what to do with them. So that would make sense
Yeah.
potentially. Okay. So with all of this, then, when you've got a patient in front of you, where do you start to think about phosphate, and then what do you do about it? So if someone's sitting there going, okay, well, how do I know if this is me, and what actionable steps can I take if phosphate and phosphorus is an issue and it's contributing to my overall decline in kidney function?
Yeah, perfect question. So the first most low-hanging fruit to think about is just if you're getting unnecessary phosphorus in your food supply where it's been added.
Mm.
And a lot of times we think about, oh, we don't have to worry about phosphorus unless you see it on the blood work because it's something your doctor's going to draw. But the truth is, until you're stage 4 or stage 5, it doesn't change in your blood. So you can't rely on your blood work and say, hey, I don't have any, like phosphorus is not an issue for me. I'm not going to worry about it in my food supply if your lab is normal because it actually doesn't dysregulate until things are very quite broken in
Mm.
the whole metabolism of the bones, etc. Our body's so amazing on how it compensates and re-regulates itself when there's dysfunction. But a lot of times you're just, and this phosphorus is a good example, you're not going to see phosphorus go up until you really have like some big issues with your parathyroid hormone and like a bunch of other areas. So
Mm.
don't trust your blood work. But for me, if a patient comes in, I say, because we're going to cover as many bases as possible, one of the key things we'll start is just phosphate additives. And that means just looking at the ingredients in your food. Even things that the example I use in our free class is I have a picture of a organic coconut yogurt, right? It's made by like soy brand or something. I can't remember. But it looks super like clean, super nice, healthy choice. It's plant-based. It doesn't, whatever. But when you look at the ingredients, like the first one is organic coconut milk, and you're like, okay, good, I mean organic. And then you go down the line and it has two additives in it. One of them is dipotassium phosphate, and the other is, I think it's hexametaphosphate. I can't remember. But it has these ingredients added that are phosphate additives. And whenever you see that PHOS, phos, in your label, that is something that the manufacturers have added in. Sometimes they're adding it in to bind up with calcium so they can add calcium into the food. Sometimes they're adding it as a preservative or a anti-caking agent, but as much as possible, getting those added phosphates, phosphate additives out of your food supply is so basic, right? Real basic intervention to do. So that would be number one.
Mhm.
Um, the second thing, if we're thinking about phosphorus, is I do pay attention to people's history, especially women with their bone health, because I
Mm.
know if they already have some osteoporosis or other like bone issues, that's a clue for me being like, well, you're already dysregulated in your minerals overall. And that is going to include phosphorus. It's not going to show up on your labs, but this is one that I would pay attention to and think about what nutrients we're going to put in to support good phosphorus metabolism overall.
Yeah.
So that would be another clue for me. And then the last clue that I would use is I would be thinking about what's in their diet now that would be supporting overall good mineral metabolism. No nutrient lives in a silo, right? There's
Right.
not one nutrient that's like you put it in and it does its job and then like it's done. Every nutrient depends on all the other nutrients to do its work. So like with iron, you need some vitamin A and zinc. And with like there's so many nutrients, like they depend on something else to get their job done. Uh with with phosphorus, I'd be really thinking about, okay, well, how much calcium do people have? Are they taking enough vitamin D? Right? I can look at a vitamin D level. That's super easy. Um, where your vitamin D levels at? Do you get enough B3 in? Do you get enough niacin in your diet? Because niacin is a very potent phosphate binding nutrient in your gut. And so, like overall, that would help with your regulation. But I'd be looking at overall all the nutrients because that could help me see, whoa, if you're kind of out of balance with your vitamin D, I can pretty much guarantee you're going to have some phosphorus
Yeah,
problems as
exactly.
well.
Yeah. No, very good. Okay. And are there any symptoms that people might experience on a day-to-day that might indicate the phosphorus is
Oh,
out? A symptom picture that goes with this?
yeah, that's a good question. So most people in early stage kidney disease wouldn't have any phosphorus symptoms. You would definitely pay attention to them. The classic symptoms are itchy skin. Um, what we see for dialysis patients, and I could walk through a dialysis unit was in dialysis, and I could just look at people's arms and I would know what their labs were going to be for
Yeah.
phosphorus. But
Yeah.
you get kind of these little like white bumps. And when
Mhm.
people scratch them, it's almost like white dust comes out, and that's a calcium phosphorus deposit. But I'd see little scars on my patients' arms or their bodies from having excessive phosphorus or the phosphorus not being well managed. So that would be one symptom. Itchy eyes because it deposits when your levels are really high. It's going to deposit in soft tissues like your eyes, um, and like under your skin. So, but the eyes are real classics. People get red, like really red, itchy eyes, just so irritated. So those are some things that I could see as well.
Okay. And so obviously we're looking at taking it out of the diet, and then making sure that the calcium metabolism is working, the vitamin D levels are good. Is there anything else that you think of when we're looking at the management of high phosphorus levels that you're like, yeah, we absolutely have to put this in to help?
I mean, I think until we have more specific testing mechanisms, like you talked about at the beginning, FGF-23, clotho, it's really going to be about using just practical good judgment and working towards this whole foods approach, which is good for, all of health anyways, right? There's a bajillion ways we can say that helps the body. But for phosphorus, I think we need more specific testing to be able to say, hey, you're a type of person who's real sensitive to phosphorus for whatever reason early on. And when we make an intervention for phosphorus, whether it's better diet, using a little bit of niacin, taking out phosphate additives, that we see that it's not such a heavy load in your body. We just can't pick that up in the blood work right now. So it's kind of one of those things that you say, this is something I can be proactive about. And so I'm going to just do it. And it's hard to measure the impact of that single thing that you do.
Yeah.
But I think there's enough evidence that it causes problems that there's no reason you wouldn't do that.
Yeah, I totally agree. Okay. Anything else you want to add about our friend phosphorus before we wrap up? And I'm definitely going to go on a dig dive into glycophosphates. And we'll do.
And I'm
We're
going
going
to
to
read your
talk.
blog post in about a month from this.
Right. Yes. Actually, glycophosphates. I'm going to, Libby, who writes my articles, I'm going to say, I've got an article for you, Libby. Glycophosphates and kidney disease. Go
So
digging for
give your
send it.
articles afterwards. If you never go to Kidney Coach and read their blog articles, or you're not on their email list, get on their email list and go read their blog, because they are the best in the industry. They are excellent. I always make sure and I read them because I learned so much. So just a pitch for your stuff, because I think it's really good.
No, we do put a lot of effort into those. So sometimes I write and sometimes Libby writes, and she's a naturopath as well. So yeah, no, we
They're
like our
really, really good.
we go down rabbit
Yeah, so
holes.
I don't think there's any other like tie-up thoughts here. Well, actually I do have one tie-up thought here. One of the biggest confusion points on phosphorus to point out is that people consider all phosphorus the same. But in a lot of whole grains or lentils, or when it's naturally occurring in a plant food, it is very much bound up with something called a phytate. So you don't absorb so much of those phosphorus components versus what you would get in beer, dairy, meat in particular. Those are also very phosphorus rich, but it's
Yeah.
not bound up with fiber. I have a lot of people that come in and they're like, well, I read on a website that I should be eating white bread, not whole grains, and that I shouldn't eat any legumes or nuts because they're really high in phosphorus. And the thing is, you're just not going to absorb those very well. And so we add those in for pretty much all our patients. Well, they're doing keto, we're not doing a lot of whole grains, but if you have restricted your diet with beans, nuts, whole grains, because of phosphorus in particular, that's something you can add back in. You're not going to see your phosphorus levels go up. I don't find it hugely risky. Dairy is very individual for the person, but dairy has a lot of cofactors to help metabolize phosphorus correctly anyway. So
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. Yes, it's whether phosphorus is bind into the phytates or not. No, that's a good wind-up point, Jess.
yeah.
All right, well, if you want to know more about what Jessie does and her team, you can head to kidneynutritionalinstitute.org. She works with an amazing team of renal dietitians, really from any research I've done. They are the leaders in the field. They think outside the box. They're very treat the person, not the disease. You're going to get individualized holistic healthcare. They're going to look at your microbiome and toxins and do all of the things rather than the things that I see other renal dietitians do, which is just take all potassium out of your diet and send you on your happy way. So if you're looking for a really good renal dietitian, then I really recommend you head to KNI, kidneynutritionalinstitute.org. I'll put their details below. They work with everybody in the US. They also are on telehealth, so they can do worldwide consultations. I know lots of people doing our program have worked with someone from the team that works with Jess. So Jess, thank you again. I'm going to do a bit more research on this. I'll put all the links. So Jessianna had a whole pile of studies and links of all the things that phosphorus does. I'll put that in the notes below so you can have a look at that. If there's anything you want Jessianna and I to talk about, put it in the comments and let us know. We are going to do a deep dive on nitrogen. I'm going to go and do a deep dive on glycophosphates and see what their role is in all of this, because I'm beginning to think they play a bigger role than I'd thought of before. And if you want to know more about what we do, head to kidneycoach.com. As Jessianna mentioned, you can go find our articles there, get on our newsletter list. It means we'll notify you when we put up new articles. Head to our Facebook page, our Instagram page, and there's a whole pile of great resources on communnutritionalinstitute.org as well, like free recipes and a whole pile of other good things. And I know Jessianna and her team are about to launch their new and we'll have to send the details out, but their new polycystic kidney disease program is about to be launched in a couple of weeks. So you'll have to make sure you tell us next time you're on, Jess, and we'll make sure we let everybody know about that as well.
Okay, cool. Awesome.
All right. Hit like and subscribe. We'll see you all next time, Jessianna. Thank you so much for your time. I always appreciate you.